having a look at the vertebra. Different parts of the vertebra are different shapes. You may be able to see it that way a little bit better, because different parts of the vertebra have different functions. So I have 7 cervical or neck vertebra. The very top one is very flat because it allows for my head to rotate. So it's almost, I think of it looking like a golf tee, and my head is the golf ball. So my head needs to, or my axis needs to be able to rotate. So that's quite flat. But then the next 6 are not so flat. But these little processes here do allow for the neck to turn. So the basic function of the cervical is rotation. Once I get down to my thoracic, and I have 12 thoracic vertebrae, my thoracic are extremely important because they attach to the rib cage, and of course some of my most important organs live within the rib cage, including the heart and the lungs. I cannot survive for very long without either of those working well. So the thoracic is very, very strong and quite thick in its structure, especially as far as these little processes are concerned. They stick out quite a bit to protect the rib cage, but also they are designed for me to be able to flex forwards and extend. In fact, when I breathe, and you could practice this now, when I breathe in, you'll see in my upper back, my thoracic, what happens. A little bit of extension. When I breathe out, naturally a little bit of flexion. Extension, flexion, right? That's part of the design of the thoracic spine. Then when I get to the lumbar spine, there is a junction called the thoracolumbar junction. It's between T7 and T12, where the bottom of the ribs end, and then I have the lumbar spine. Do you see that then there's no bones in there except for the vertebra? Now, the vertebrae here get even thicker because they're ending up taking a lot more load of the entire torso. So the further down we get along the line, the thicker the vertebra and the thicker the discs as well, because of that load function. I have 5 lumbar vertebrae. So from L5 to L1 at the top. So I go from the top, C1 to C7 from the top, T1 to T12 from the top, L1 to L5, and you can see that they get quite a bit thicker as they go down. The function of those guys is rotation and flexion, extension, but more so rotation. As I walk, there has to be some rotation of the pelvis. Say if I'm taking my right foot forwards, I have to rotate the pelvis a little bit to the right to swing the leg forwards. That's partly the function of my lumbar spine. Down the bottom, I have what's called my sacrum. Now, anatomically, it is recognized to be, you can see, it's recognized to be different vertebrae, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But it actually ends up being fused as one bone, and I think of it like an upside down triangle or a pear that has been cut in half and it's upside down. So the function of my sacrum is load, so load bearing, but also it works with the other two bones of the pelvis called the ilium, which we will go through in another video. But that's my entire spine. Very important to note that between the vertebrae, I have discs, and those discs are almost spongy, so they stop the vertebra from touching each other and allow for the spinal cord, which lives right inside the vertebra. So the vertebra actually is hollow. Inside the vertebra is my spinal cord, and out of the spinal cord, like little tentacles, grow all of my nerves. My nerves need space between the vertebra to be able to grow out, and they end up growing all the way through the entire body. And it's actually my nerves that innervate muscles, innervate all of my organs for them to function. So if I have a disc that is damaged, or a disc that is dehydrated or degenerated, then there's going to be less space between the vertebrae. So say my discs allow for this much space between the vertebrae. There's something wrong with that disc, whether it's dehydration, degeneration or damage, then there's less space between the vertebrae, and then quite often that's what causes what we call a nerve impingement. If you have a nerve impingement, then potentially that nerve is no longer communicating either to the muscle that it is meant to innervate or to the organ that is meant to innervate, and then that can cause dysfunction of the muscle, it can cause neural pain. So very important that we have a very healthy spine, both for the communication to go out into the entire system, but also for the entire system to communicate back into the nerves. So information goes out, things happen, but then also information comes in for that innovation to continue. So obviously our spine is extremely important, and the health of those bones is extremely important, but ultimately it's just one part of an entire system.